Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Wall of Power Radio Hour. This is your host, Paul Metza. As you know, Minneapolis is burning, and we have one of the greatest journalists in the Twin Cities as our guest tonight. Andy Mannix covers federal courts and law enforcement for the Minneapolis StarTribune. He's been doing that since 2016. He covers Minneapolis City Hall, statewide criminal justice cases, and issues at the Department of Corrections. He also teaches at the University of Minnesota School of Journalism, where he is an alumni. He also got his master's degree at the University of California, Berkeley, and his work has included over the years solitary confinement issues in Minnesota prisons, the use of sedatives in police encounters, and several high-profile police shootings. He's also worked for MinnPost, the Seattle Times, and City Pages. He's been on top of this issue concerning the death, possible murder of George Floyd, and we're so happy in the midst of a very busy week for Mr. Mannix that he's with us today. Thanks, Andy, for taking time. How are you today? I know you've been swamped.
Yeah, happy to be here, and I'm good. It's been a busy week. It was a busy night, late night last night, and an early morning. But we're all hanging in there.
Now, it wouldn't be a cliche to say you've been under the gun here in the last few days, because you actually got hit by a rubber bullet shot by a policeman a few days ago at one of the protests. Correct?
Yeah, it was on Tuesday, which was we all kind of woke up to the news and the video of George Floyd, the moments before his death, and so I was out sort of at that first protest. Started in front of Cup Foods where the video was taken, where this incident occurred, and then marched over to the 3rd Precinct, and we just got like a taste of kind of what was to come, but it was, folks breaking out windows at the precinct, vandalizing squad cars, and then the police coming back pretty aggressively, just flooding the area with tear gas, those flashbangs, that aren't really, they're just meant to disorient you, but it kind of makes you feel like you're in like Vietnam or something, when the smoke is going around and you're hearing those just going off all around you. And then I thought it was fairly, safe distance away. I was across the street in the Arby's parking lot there with some other folks who had kind of fled just because that tear gas pushed us all out. And just out of nowhere, I was trying to actually get out a tweet to show people that this thing had really turned, and police were coming pretty hard with the riot gear. And this projectile just nails me right in the upper thigh.
Wow.
I'm looking down. I'm certainly not doing anything that I would perceive that would make me a target. And it was, I tweeted a picture of it. We were trying to figure out what it is. It wasn't, they shoot those marking rounds that hit you with like that fluorescent chalk, so police know later to arrest you. Mm-hmm. And those things can hurt, but this was harder than that. This wasn't a marking round. This was like a hard plastic with sort of like kind of a squishy end. So there's some dispute. Is it considered a rubber bullet? Is it, some people said it's called like a sponge grenade. Mm-hmm. But it, when it's coming at your body at 200 miles an hour, and you're not expecting it, it was quite painful, and I'm certainly smarting from it still.
Well, imagine if that hit you in the eye,
Yeah, they call these less lethal. They can't call them non-lethal because, you get hit in the wrong place with one of those things, and certainly it could really do some permanent damage. And there were folks out there who I saw, I don't know what they were hit with or what happened, but they're bleeding from the head, or they're, like really, really injured. There's one point where we're just like, again, across the street, at this point I had kind of moved on the other side of the street, where that Target is that ended up getting, broken into the next night. And, again, pretty far away. And these things are just flying. I hear them whizzing by my ear. They're bouncing off street lights and signs. So it really seemed to me that there wasn't a lot going into the aiming of these things, and they were just sort of firing them at and hitting certainly peaceful protesters. Even if that's not what they were trying to do, they were really getting caught in the middle of it. No doubt about that.
How many people, Andy, in that first the incident you're talking about? How many people were there protesting or witnessing it?
So the number that. So again, it started at Cup Foods, and then that's 38th in Chicago. And if you're familiar with the geography of that area, Third Precinct. Minnehaha Lake is several miles. I don't really know exactly, 3 or 4 miles, and it started to rain. So I think we started with the number that the police have been using is 8,000 people, which in a pandemic especially is like, this is, I've been to, many of these other police protests over incidents of use of force like this and officer-involved shootings and stuff like that, and I can't say that I've seen a bigger one than this. And again, especially in a pandemic, it was really you could really tell that people were really affected by this video. So by the time we got to the precinct, I'd say it started raining, and I'd say we lost I don't know, a few thousand of those maybe. Had kind of come for the beginning and petered off, but there were still, thousands of people kind of scattered in different groups, especially when the tear gas started coming out. That's going to send people just sort of scattering wherever they can to get away from it. So it wasn't as much of like that, people just clustered together. So a little bit harder to gauge, but a few thousand, I'd say.
Well, and it's so. To add insult to injury, here we are in the middle of a pandemic. People are starting out as peaceful protesters and then get overwhelmed with tear gas. It's just like, it just sounds like such a dangerous situation.
Yeah, and so I and other reporters out there who I happened to, bump into were a little surprised, just because, one would think that this is the last thing they want to see on like the national news after this video is going viral of this incident with George Floyd. They don't want to see police officers shooting protesters with projectiles. So we were trying to find out why the next day that was the tactic. And what Chief Madera Arredondo said is they had originally planned on kind of letting people, not coming at them like that, but apparently when they got into they broke into the Third Precinct building, or they're breaking out windows and started vandalizing squad cars, which were parked in kind of this fenced-off area. He was saying there's guns and live ammo there.
Right.
And so it sounds like the concern was, you get a lot of people who are pretty pissed off, and suddenly they have like, a shotgun from the back of the squad car. Could more people get hurt? So that was their explanation of why they came out like that.
I saw a really troubling piece of video last night. It looked like a peaceful protest in downtown Minneapolis. A lot of people, of course, on the streets. And squad cars were going through right by 5th and Hennepin, where there's that gorgeous mural of Bob Dylan, ironically, behind this. And I don't know if you saw that, Andy. And then a squad car goes by, Hennepin cop and Minneapolis cop, and shoots tear gas out the window randomly at people on the street. Did you see that?
I did see that, and I think it was riot mace, which is almost like that. It's like a little mini fire extinguisher that just shoots. It's meant for a crowd, so it's not like what you think of as like a personal, like mace device. And that stuff, man, I'll tell you, that stuff's. I got hit once with one of right in the line of fire, one of those back at the Republican National Convention in 2008. If you recall how crazy that was.
Oh, I do.
And right in the face, and that is the most painful thing I think I've ever experienced, more so than this projectile. And so it's like, it was kind of unbelievable I think, for a lot of people to see that, because there's a lot of people who are very suspicious of the police party line right now, but we've got the police spokesman out there saying less than 24 hours earlier, our officers are so restrained. We're just out there reacting to the public safety concerns. We're trying to let people do their thing, and not, but when it comes to people are in harm's way, that's the only time we're reacting. And then you see something like that, and like you say, you got 5 or 6 squad cars going. One guy just seems to do this drive-by, indiscriminately firing this mace at a crowd of people. And again, that stuff is going to spread. I don't know what the range is on that, but it's not like it just hit one person, or you can even, it's not even that you could even consider targeting a person with that. This stuff is designed to subdue an entire crowd and have them out for a while. You're not coming back from that right away. So I think it's when you see stuff like that, you're just this sends a really, really bad message, especially at this moment.
Yeah, especially when the Minneapolis police force could use all the good PR they can get. We've got Andy Mannix on the Wall of Power Radio Hour for the whole show tonight. This is your host, Paul Metza. I'm really glad Andy took the time out of this week to talk with us, and we'll be back after these messages. Welcome back to the Wall of Power Radio Hour. This is your host, Paul Metza. My guest for the whole show tonight, so happy to have Andy Mannix, who is one of the greatest journalists, investigative reporters in the Twin Cities. He's been working with the Minneapolis StarTribune since 2016 and knows quite a bit about what's been going on and has actually been on the ground covering this. Andy, we're taping this show on Friday. The show airs on Saturday. I don't even know what date it is, May 28th, 29th today. And as I was coming into the AM 950 studio, I saw that they had taken Derek Chauvin, the Minneapolis cop that had his knee on George Floyd's neck. They just took him into custody today. You were at the FBI briefing yesterday, and you heard from Hennepin County prosecutor Mike Freeman. So give us a little background and bring us up to just an hour ago with this news.
It was based on what Mike Freeman, the Hennepin County attorney, said yesterday, and what the FBI said and U.S. attorney said yesterday. I'm pretty surprised to see Chauvin taken into custody. They've got to charge him with something, and I don't know, because it's a Friday. Maybe they have till Monday. I think there's some deal at the weekend, so usually it's 48 hours. You can't hold someone longer than that.
Right.
So that's all to say. You wouldn't be arresting him unless you're planning to charge him pretty quickly. And what Mike Freeman said yesterday was, this is going to take a while. He invoked the prosecution of the officers, charged with the death of Freddie Gray in Baltimore. If you recall, that was the prosecutor came out right away and said, we're charging these guys. And then every officer, I believe every single officer, was found not guilty. And so what Mike said is, that's what we risk if we go too fast. Mike, as people in Minneapolis know, has experience with this too, because his office convicted Mohammed Noor of murdering a citizen on duty last year. This was, of course, the Justine Damon case, which actually occurred in, I think it was it 2018 or 2017? But the trial was last year. Super rare for a police officer to be convicted with murder on duty. In fact, it's only happened a couple of times in American history. So he kind of knows, probably more than most, how long this is going to take. So, when he says this is how long it's going to take, we assume that that's going to be the case. Certainly it took a lot longer when they charged Mohammed Noor in that other case. A lot of people, a lot of reporters, were there asking, if we've all seen this video, we're all horrified by it. Mike Freeman, U.S. Attorney Erica McDonald, everyone is up there saying this is horrifying, this shouldn't have happened. So we're like, if this was two citizens, if it wasn't a police officer, and you had this video, are you trying to tell me that this guy wouldn't be in custody?
Exactly.
And in fact, you look at, there was at the pawn shop, Cadillac Pawn, I think it's called, 2 nights ago, the owner or manager or whoever, was arrested for shooting and killing somebody who was, allegedly looting his store, and it's like that guy's in custody,
Exactly.
So I think that it was hard as a, it's sort of hard to understand what exactly the calculus that they're doing behind the scenes, and to that question, Mike said, it would be unethical for me to talk about the evidence at this point. I guess a educated sort of read of that based on seeing these past ones is he is, it is different with the police officer in terms of like when when they're on duty, the bar that they have to prove for like a manslaughter or murder charge isn't the same as if it was just a citizen. There is a, what would a police officer do, what would their reasonable reaction be to this, rather than just a citizen. That was how, for example, Geronimo Yanez, the officer who shot and killed Philando Castillo, was found not guilty. Basically, an expert witness saying, as a police officer, it is reasonable that that he would have felt the threat like this. So my guess is he's really trying to make sure that before they do this thing, they have a good case. But again, it's just hard to, on like a visceral level, it's sort of hard to watch that video and understand why this person is still on the street.
Well, and I've always had a lot of respect for Mike Freeman. He's always seemed to me to be a pretty straight shooter and a pretty fair guy. But it's just these days, like you said, I mean, there's been right now 3 different camera angles on this incident, and it just, like you said, viscerally, it's just wrong, and it's disgusting, and it's horrific. And I know that neighborhood well. I've I grew up in South Minneapolis. I know all those neighborhoods in South Minneapolis, and I recently celebrated my 40th anniversary at the Parkway just up the street, and it's a great neighborhood. Maybe we'll get into this in a little bit, but I was just listening to MSNBC on the way here, and they said that George was thought about that he was passing a counterfeit $20 check, but when they were talking about the car he was in, he was sitting in a black Mercedes. And it just seems to me like, how would a guy in a black Mercedes, why would he be passing a counterfeit bill, I mean, I'm sure there's counterfeit bills out there that you might get in a transaction and use somewhere else, but that one bothers me too. We've got Andy Mannix on the show on the Wall of Power Radio Hour all night tonight. 2 more sets with Mr. Mannix. Stick around, and I'm really enjoying that he's taken time to speak with us tonight.
Not all poor men are honest, not all rich men are thieves. But the rich man owns the orchard, the poor man rakes the leaves. And as the wheel goes around, said all I want to ask is, if the rich man owns the land, why must the poor man pay the taxes? Why does justice go so slow? Slow justice slowly goes. Poor means stop and rich means go. Slow justice slowly goes. They say a woman's work is never done, and do you wonder why? They compete half as much for double time on the by and by. Well, I ain't no big shot doctor, ain't no big shot doctor's kid, but I can tell you that my mother never lived in Adam's rib. Why does justice go so slow? Slow justice slowly goes. Little girl means stop, little boy means go. Slow justice slowly goes. They killed a black minister in Memphis town, a black prince at Audubon Hall. They used different guns in Cape Town, but the same bullet shot them all. South Africa's a ghetto someday, and it's gonna break like glass. One world with different colors, you know, there ain't no second class. Why does justice go so slow? Slow justice slowly goes. Any color means stop, but only white means go. Slow justice slowly goes.
Welcome back to the Wall and Power Radio Hour. This is your host, Paul Metsa, my guest for the whole show tonight. I'm so happy that he could take time out of his busy schedule to talk with us. Andy Mannix, he's been an investigative reporter for the Minneapolis StarTribune since 2016. Andy, a little personal history that I'd like to know about. How did you get interested in studying, you went to the University of Minnesota, where you teach now at the School of Journalism. You got your master's at the University of California, Berkeley. What made you interested in criminal law and covering these sorts of things as a journalist?
Good question. I think I, like a lot of journalists I know, sort of stumbled into journalism because we wanted to be writers and had the notion that we could get paid to do it if we were journalists. I sort of entered college when the industry was good, and left kind of at the peak of, when it started to get really bad, and papers like the StarTribune were in bankruptcy. But I applied first as a music critic at the Minnesota Daily Newspaper, the U of M's paper, and they wouldn't hire me. And then they hired me on the Metro side as a news reporter. And I sort of really liked it. And one of the first stories I did was someone, like a friend of a friend, knew I worked at the paper and told me there was this guy that her friend, like, who was like a freshman, had been dating, and they were all arrested in this sort of big way, with guns and everything, and sort of came to find out that this guy was actually he was 40 years old, and he was wearing a Letterman's jacket and posing as a student, and he was just robbing everybody. He was just stealing from all these students, and sort of had been doing. And anyway, so I thought that sounded like a pretty good story, and I hadn't really done police reporting in the past, but the paper, said I could do it, and pursued it, and kind of found out he had been going from college to college in Chicago and like Florida and New York, and just doing this, and he was living in a frat and all this stuff.
Andy, this is your screenplay, dude.
I know. And I interviewed him in jail. I ended up doing this. He talked to me and he told me, I'm 20 and all this stuff.
Right.
And, we had, and it was, and I ended up I was an intern at City Pages, and they said, would you do a follow-up for us? So I did that too. But it was, and that's how I ended up working at City Pages, because they liked that story so much. But it was sort of like, you get to talk to the police, you get to talk to the criminal, you get to kind of look at these court documents, and you're not on anybody's side, but you're kind of the only one not on anybody's side. You're sort of there just seeing it all, and there's all this paperwork, police reports and stuff that kind of. So anyway, I just sort of really liked that, that kind of reporting, and I was a big sort of fan of your old pal David Carr.
Oh yeah.
When I got into the alt weekly world, he was sort of the one that we all really looked up to as what we wanted to be.
The gold standard.
So I'd go back and read, we had City Pages, the Twin Cities Reader had closed by this time, and we had inherited all of their clips were just in this room, and I'd go back there and read, all these David Carr stories, doing this sort of gangland, on the street kind of reporting, and that was, really sort of, for me, in those formative years, that was really important in terms of kind of helping me navigate, doing stories that aren't just you're taking, the official account, and getting out there and really seeing it for yourself and talking to people who aren't, official sources, I guess, we would call them. You're talking to the people who are there, who are involved. And so that's always, so anyway, that sort of put me on the path, I think, to do what I'm doing now and to, be the first one to volunteer when they say, we got kind of a hairy protest going on out there. Who wants to go? I really do like and think it's really, really important for us journalists to be there and be as close as possible.
Did you ever have a chance to meet David Carr?
I did. I met him when I interviewed him once when he was coming out, or a documentary about him was coming out. That they were premiering in
Page One, I believe.
South Anthony, Maine. Yep, Page One. So I sat down with him and interviewed him, and that was really cool. I talked to him a couple more times, including we did this kind of oral history of the CC Club story that was kind of all about how, this bar, the CC Club, had kind of been I think it was being sold at the time, and we didn't know if it was going to stay open, so it was sort of like eulogizing a bar that still exists, but the replacements and the music scene there and the journalist scene and talking to Tom Arnold and all these guys, we just thought there was a cool Minneapolis history story.
Well, I was actually I was honored to be interviewed for that story as well. And back in the battle days, David Carr and Tom Arnold, because Tom lived right across the street with four other comedians, and we opened up that bar at 8 a.m. more than once.
Yeah, I think that was it was like 2 a.m. back over to Tom's house across the street, and then back at 8 a.m.
That was that was the pinball maneuver. I'm going to put in a good word for the CC Club. My friend Cray McCauley is one of the cooks there. They're opening up, if not this Sunday, the Sunday after, on the patio on both sides of the building, the Lindale side and the 26th side. I go there about once a month for a great Sunday brunch, so you've got to make reservations and call ahead, a $5 reservation fee. But any of you that love the CC Club and that great food and that vibe, keep your eyes on it, because the small businesses need, I'm a musician, and I know what the clubs are going through. And then you see Andy Mannix, all the businesses that were looted or damaged or burnt down last night. And you go, there's such tangential damage in these situations. How much do you think this is outside provocateurs coming in just to cause trouble for whatever reasons, and how many is just legitimate protesters that are pissed off?
That's a really good question, and one that I've been asked and thought about. One thing that comes to mind is every time stuff like this happens, people say it's outside protesters or it's paid protesters. Going back to the Republican National Convention 2008, which I was talking about, where I was my first experience with getting maced and clubbed to the ground by the cops during one of these big protests.
Right.
That was actually a lot of outside protesters did come in and were prosecuted. But we always hear that, and it's hard to know. So I guess I would say let's be careful with that one right now, because I think that it is true that a lot of people who live in Minneapolis were out there and were enraged. And to the extent that there's folks coming from, I've heard Chicago or wherever, I just don't know yet, and I just feel like we should be careful to make, to draw conclusions about that.
Yeah, no, I would totally agree with it. But it's just, boy, I saw the list this morning in the Min Post, and it was dozens and dozens of businesses that have been broken into or burnt or windows smashed.
It's totally surreal. I mean, it's surreal for people who live in this city like you and I do, and who have spent a lot of time, at that Target or at, the Hexagon bar.
Yeah, right. That was sad.
Or who I've, reported on that police precinct many times, and to see, the footage last night of people inside there, the building's on fire, the sprinklers are flooded, the windows are broken out. It's just sort of like a surreal way to see your city.
Why do you think they stood down there and left and just gave it up to the protesters, which became chaotic and filled with mayhem?
Man, that is the question today. And I don't know if you were watching, there was a press conference with Governor Walz and some National Guard folks, and the National Guard basically said, we were there, we were activating, we were ready, and we were waiting for a mission, and the mayor, Jacob Frey, just didn't give us one, so we had no orders, so we couldn't do anything.
Wow.
And in terms of what goes into that, I mean, I think everyone watching that video, they didn't feel like there was a lot of love for the mayor and those statements, So yeah, I don't know if it was like, they don't want to see those images again of the tear gas and whatever, but these images now are circulating, and I think if you live in Minneapolis, especially in that area, I think a lot of people are scared this morning. They're sort of seeing this lawlessness and seeing these businesses and where they get their groceries, these small markets, or the Arby's, their neighborhood Arby's is just gone, and it's like I think it's scary for a lot of people, and I don't know that I've ever heard of a police precinct building in a major American city being broken into and burnt down. I mean, at one point last night, the city of Minneapolis was saying, well, there's reason to believe that there was gas lines cut and explosives put in there, and everyone should move back because we think it's going to blow up.
Oh, man.
You know what I mean? That this is it's sort of I don't know. Like, all I can say is it's surreal. It's shocking. And there's that's not to say that people aren't protesting for
good reasons.
Good reasons they really believe in. But I think just if you're your average, I think a lot of Minneapolitans are watching that footage and sort of seeing what happened, and probably not feeling great about it or super safe about it, or they're concerned for those business owners and stuff. So
we've got Andy Mannix on for one more set on the Wall of Power Radio Hour, one of the great investigative journalists for the Minneapolis StarTribune in town. So stick around. We're going to hear a little music, and we'll be back. One more set in just a bit. Welcome back to the last set of the Wall and Power Radio Hour. This is your host, Paul Metza. My guest for the whole show, Mr. Andy Mannix, a great investigative reporter for the Minneapolis StarTribune, who's nice enough to take time out of a very busy week to chat with us here on the radio show tonight and for AM 950 listeners. And between segments here, he told me that he's turned down all kinds of national interview opportunities, but was kind enough to speak with me. So, Andy, I really appreciate that. I was talking to a friend of mine a lovely gal who lives in Calgary, and who I've just recently met and got to know, and I was telling her about what was going on in Minneapolis, and she said, where she's from, it doesn't have this real racial tension like she's seeing on the news happening here. And I told her, I said, Tara, neither has Minneapolis. I said, this has been one of the most integrated cities for the last 40 or 50 years. I mean, wouldn't you agree that we've got a pretty safe and cool town here in terms of the races mixing, getting along, and working together and having fun?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when you look at, that's a tough question, because I think that, I think Minnesota does struggle with race issues, especially as a state as a whole. When you look at, I covered, Department of Corrections, and when you look at who's going to prison versus the racial makeup of the state, Native Americans and African Americans are the ones who are impacted by our criminal justice system in a really disproportionate way. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think Paul, you and I both live in Northeast Minneapolis, where there's a lot of different kinds of people and a lot of signs that like yard signs that say all are welcome, and
right.
So I think from my neighborhood perspective and the places, especially in Minneapolis proper, that I go to, they are integrated, and they are very sort of accepting and whatnot. But I do think there's aside from other folks, who think that Minneapolis has a history and just Minnesota in general, with racial division. For example, when you look at the history of the city, there used to be these racial covenants in housing where it said people of color can't live in certain neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Or this house, and we're still recovering from that. I think when you look at density in North Minneapolis, for example, of affordable housing projects and stuff like that. For years, they were just putting all those in North Minneapolis, and those areas of the city were, not getting the attention economically and otherwise to other parts of the city. So I think a lot of people, wonder if Minneapolis does have a race problem or a history of a race problem, and this is where it's sort of coming to a head. Things are really boiling over, but it's maybe tied to this much longer.
And I wouldn't doubt that at all. I guess Andy Mannix, I'm seeing it through the lens of a musician.
Yeah.
And, it's the bands in this town that I've loved, from Prince's band to the new solo song. I mean, it's mixed, it's cool, everybody learns from each other, gets along, hangs out. But yeah, there is, I think there's systemic racism all around the country, and I wouldn't say Minneapolis is excluded from that. And you look, I was talking to my friend last night, and I said, the last time the city really blew up on fire was the summer of '67. Down Broadway Avenue on the north side, which is not too far from where you and I live, where it totally went on fire. So, but to see this sort of visceral response to a very tragic situation, it's really, for those of us that have felt pretty safe and sound in Minneapolis, it's, maybe it's the wake-up call we need. I'm not sure. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think I think there's something to that. And I think, a lot of people are in a bubble, where they kind of live in a neighborhood and are sort of surrounded by like-minded people, and they don't see some of the hardship that does go on in other areas of the city. I think I am guilty of that. I think a lot of us are. The past few years with Donald Trump, Minneapolis being a liberal, politically liberal city and having politically liberal politicians, we think that we're different than these places where you're seeing you're seeing, like in Charlotte,
Right.
For example, where you're seeing these sort of like, white nationalists amassing and feeling empowered. But yeah, I mean, I think that there is really something that we can all take from this, that we don't necessarily all have the same shared experience, even if sometimes we think we do. And people are angry, and I think that there's always a lot of value in these moments and taking a step back and listening to why they're angry, even if you think you already know, or if you think you're on their side or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes there's a little bit more to that. So I think that that's something we should all be doing. Is we have our first kind of reaction, which for many of us has been shock. But for sure, I think that it's important that we kind of do take a step back and can think about these larger issues in the next few days.
Andy Mannix, that is a beautiful way to end this interview. I really appreciate your time. I follow you in the paper. I follow you on Twitter. You're doing God's work out there. Be safe, be strong, stay positive, and maybe we can check in after a few weeks and see how the investigations and everything is going with the cops involved in the tragic death of George Floyd. So thanks again, Andy. Have a wonderful day, man. Look to see you.
You too.
I'll look to see you walking your dog around the neighborhood.
All right. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, buddy. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to the Wall of Power Radio Hour. The show is produced by Paul Metza, engineered by Patrick Lilia. We'd like to thank our guest, Minneapolis StarTribune investigative journalist Andy Mannix. Great insight to this crazy, crazy week in Minneapolis. Everybody out there, stay strong, stay positive, but stay safe, and make sure to check in on your neighbors. You can follow what I'm up to at paulmetza.com. I've also got a Venmo tip jar if you would like to support the work I'm doing on both my radio and TV shows, along with my good work out in the community as a musician. And remember, like my father, Elder Metza, used to tell me, remember to be kind and make someone happy.
While the power will fall in the time before the fire.
Hey, what's up now?
Brother, what's up?
This is a groovy party, man.
Yeah,
I
brother,
can dig it.
solid. Right on.
Hey, man, what's your name? Everything is everything. Do the get down today, boy.
Mother, there's too many of you crying. Brother, there's far too many of you dying. You know we've got